Right now, somewhere in your house, your phone is buzzing. A tab is open you forgot about. A thought about yesterday's argument is sitting quietly in the back of your mind, waiting to pull you away from whatever you're supposed to be doing. And here's the truth nobody tells you. It's not going to stop. Not today. Not this year. The world is not going to get quieter so that you can finally focus. The noise is permanent. The only thing that can change it is you. 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor sat in a tent on the edge of a battlefield, army waiting, empire crumbling in places, and he still found the stillness to write one of the most focused pieces of literature in human history. Marcus Aurelius did not have fewer distractions than you. He had an empire's worth of them. What he had was a system, a set of habits so powerful that historians still study how a man carrying the weight of Rome on his shoulders could think with such clarity. Today, you're going to learn that system. 12 habits practiced by the Stoics, refined over centuries, that will not just improve your focus, they will change the way your mind works at its root. Stay until the end, because habit number 7 is the one that most people get completely backwards, and it's probably costing you hours of your day without you even realizing it. This is Wisdom of the Stoics. Welcome back to Wisdom of the Stoics, the channel where ancient philosophy meets modern life, where we take the hard-won wisdom of men like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, and turn it into something you can actually use today, in your work, your relationships, and in the quiet moments when it's just you and your own mind. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing. We publish new Stoic teachings designed to help you build a calmer, sharper, more disciplined version of yourself. And if you've been here before, welcome home. Before we begin, I want you to do one thing, just one. Put your phone face down, or better yet, in another room. Not because I'm asking you to perform some ritual, but because everything we're about to discuss will only work if you give it room to land. The Stoics believed that wisdom heard in distraction is wisdom wasted. So for the next half hour, let's actually be here. Let's begin. Why focus feels impossible today. Before we get into the habits, we need to understand the enemy. Not your phone, not your job, not your children or your commute. The real enemy of focus, according to the Stoics, is something far more personal, the untrained mind. Epictetus, a man born into slavery who later became one of the most respected philosophers in Rome, taught something radical for his time. He said that we suffer not from the events themselves, but from our judgments about them. Applied to focus, this means something profound. You don't lack focus because of your phone. You lack focus because your mind has never been trained to resist the pull of the phone. The device is just the modern excuse. The real issue is internal. Think about the last time you sat down to do something important. Maybe it was a work project, a conversation you needed to have, or even just reading a book. How long before your mind wandered? 10 minutes, 5, 90 seconds. For most people today, the average is embarrassingly short. And it's not because you're broken, it's because, like almost everyone else, you were never taught how to train attention. You were taught math. You were taught history. Nobody taught you how to sit with your own mind without flinching. This is where Stoicism becomes not just philosophy, but a practical training manual. The ancient Stoics were obsessed with the idea of the ruling faculty, the part of you that decides where your attention goes. They believed that if you don't train that faculty, something else will train it for you. In their time, it was gossip, politics, the chaos of Roman public life. In your time, it's notifications, algorithms, and infinite scroll. The habits you're about to learn were not designed for ancient Rome. They were designed for the human mind, and the human mind hasn't changed nearly as much as the world around it has. Let's begin with the first habit, the one that everything else is built on. Habit 1, the morning reservation. Marcus Aurelius began nearly every day the same way, not with his phone, obviously, but with something just as tempting in his era, the demands of an empire, messages from generals, requests from senators, problems that needed his immediate attention. And yet, before any of that touched his mind, he did something simple. He reserved the first moments of his day for himself. In his private writings, the collection we now call Meditations, he reminds himself, almost like a coach talking to an athlete before a match. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain about if I'm going to do what I was born for? This wasn't about productivity hacks. It was about ownership. Before the world claims your attention, you claim it first. Today, most people wake up and immediately hand their mind over to someone else. A notification, a headline, a message that wasn't meant for them, but somehow demands a reaction anyway. By the time they've had their first sip of coffee, their attention has already been rented out to 5 different sources, none of which they chose consciously. The morning reservation habit is simple in practice, but powerful in effect. Before you check your phone, before you check anything, take 5 to 10 minutes that belong entirely to you. Not scrolling, not planning frantically, just sitting, breathing, thinking about the day ahead on your own terms. Some people journal, some people simply sit in silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The method matters less than the principle. You decide first." The world can wait 10 minutes. It has been trying to get your attention since the moment you were born. It can wait a little longer. Try this tomorrow morning, just tomorrow, and notice, really notice, how different the rest of your day feels when you start it as the author, not the reader of your own attention. Habit 2. The discipline of assent. Here's something almost nobody tells you about focus. It's not really about concentration. It's about filtering every single second. Your mind is bombarded with things it could pay attention to. A sound outside, a memory, a worry, a temptation to check your phone. Just for a second, focus isn't the ability to block all of this out through sheer willpower. Focus is the ability to choose, quickly and consistently, what deserves your attention and what doesn't. The Stoics had a specific practice for this, and they called it the discipline of assent. In simple terms, before you react to a thought, an impulse or an urge, you pause, even for half a second, and ask, should I give this my attention or not? Most people never do this. A thought arises. I wonder what's happening on social media. And within a second, their hand is already reaching for the phone. There was no decision. There was only impulse, followed by action, with the mind as a passive bystander. The Stoics considered this one of the great tragedies of human life, living entirely by impulse, never actually choosing anything, mistaking reaction for freedom. Practicing the discipline of assent starts small. The next time you feel the urge to check your phone while working, don't immediately obey it. And don't immediately fight it either. Just notice it. Say internally, there's an impulse. I don't have to act on it right now. Then return to your work. That tiny pause, repeated dozens of times a day, rewires the relationship between impulse and action. Over weeks, you stop being a slave to every mental itch that crosses your mind. This alone, practiced consistently, is one of the most powerful upgrades you can make to your ability to focus, because it addresses the root cause, not just the symptom. If this idea is landing for you, drop a comment below with the word assent. I want to see how many of you are ready to actually apply this, not just watch it. Habit 3. Voluntary discomfort. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, a former advisor to an emperor, someone who had access to every luxury his era could offer, did something that seems strange at first glance. Periodically, he would deliberately live like a poor man. He would eat the simplest food, wear the coarsest clothes, and sleep on a hard bed. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. He explained this practice in a letter to a friend, saying that we should set aside a certain number of days to be content with the scantiest fare, so that we test whether the thing we fear is truly something to be feared, and so that our mind can grow accustomed to not being controlled by comfort. Why does this matter for focus? Because an untrained mind that has never experienced discomfort will flee toward comfort the moment concentration gets difficult. And concentration always gets difficult at some point. That's the nature of deep work. The 10th minute of a hard task is uncomfortable. The mind, if untrained, will search desperately for an escape, a snack, a scroll, a distraction, anything to relieve the discomfort of sustained effort. Voluntary discomfort trains you to tolerate this, feeling without immediately fleeing from it. You don't need to sleep on the floor like Seneca, but you can practice small versions daily, sitting with a mildly uncomfortable task a few extra minutes, before taking a break, or resisting the very normal urge to reach for entertainment the moment boredom sets in. Every time you tolerate discomfort instead of escaping it, you build what modern psychologists call distress tolerance, and what the Stoics simply called strength of mind. This is the actual mechanism behind sustained focus, not motivation, not inspiration, but the trained ability to sit with discomfort a little longer than the untrained person can. Habit 4, the evening review. At the end of each day before sleep, Seneca had a habit passed down from his teacher Sextius. He would ask himself a series of questions. What bad habit have I cured today? What fault have I checked? In what respect am I better? He described his mind as a judge examining the whole of the day's conduct, and said that nothing produces tranquility like this practice. This might seem unrelated to focus at first, but it's actually one of the most overlooked tools for improving it. Here's why. Without review, you never learn what's actually stealing your attention. You feel vaguely distracted, vaguely unproductive, but you can't name the specific moments where your focus broke down. And what you can't name, you can't fix. The evening review applied to focus looks like this. Before bed, spend 3 to 5 minutes asking yourself, when today did I focus well? When did my attention scatter and what triggered it? Was it a notification? A specific person? A certain time of day when my energy naturally dips? You're not judging yourself harshly here. The Stoics were famously against self-punishment through guilt. You're simply gathering data, like a scientist studying their own mind. Do this consistently for 2 weeks, and patterns will emerge that you were completely blind to before. Maybe you'll discover your focus collapses every day around 3 p.m., which might mean you need a different type of task scheduled then, or a short walk instead of another coffee. Maybe you'll realize it's not your phone that breaks your focus, but a specific person who always messages you with urgency about non-urgent things. Once you can name the enemy, you can build a specific defense against it. This is precision the untrained mind never achieves, because it never stops to look at itself honestly. Habit 5. Memento mori. This next habit sounds heavy, and it is, but stay with me, because this is where things start to shift from technique into something deeper. The Stoics practice something called memento mori, remember that you will die. Marcus Aurelius wrote it to himself constantly, reminding himself that he could leave this life right now, and that this fact should shape how he chooses to act and think in every moment. This wasn't morbid obsession. It was the opposite. It was a tool for radical clarity. Here's the connection to focus that most people miss entirely. A huge amount of your scattered attention comes from operating as if you have infinite time. When you believe, even subconsciously, that you'll always have tomorrow to do the meaningful work, today's attention becomes cheap. You can afford to waste it on trivial arguments online, on doom scrolling, on distractions, because there's always later to catch up. But the moment you genuinely internalize that your time is finite, not as a scary abstract fact, but as a felt reality, your relationship with your own attention changes instantly. Suddenly wasting 2 hours scrolling through content that adds nothing to your life feels less like a harmless break and more like theft, because it is. It's theft from the only resource you can never get back. Try this once a day. Take 15 seconds, just 15, and genuinely consider that this day is not guaranteed to repeat. Not to spiral into fear, but to sharpen your sense of what actually deserves your attention today. People who practice this consistently report something remarkable. The trivial distractions that used to feel irresistible start to feel almost embarrassing, in comparison to what they could be doing instead. This is not motivation. This is perspective. And perspective is a far more durable fuel for focus than motivation ever will be. If this section is hitting you differently than the others, I want you to pause the video right here for 10 seconds and just sit with it before continuing. Then come back, because Habit 6 builds directly on this. Habit 6, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus opened his most famous teaching, the Enchiridion, with a single idea so important that everything else he taught was essentially a variation of it. He said that some things are within our power and some things are not. Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our own actions, these are within our power. Our body, our reputation, other people's opinions of us, external events, these are not within our power. This single distinction, properly applied, might be the most powerful focus tool ever developed, and almost nobody uses it correctly. Here's why. An enormous percentage of scattered attention comes from mentally wrestling with things outside your control. You're trying to focus on a project, but part of your mind is replaying an argument you can't change, worrying about an outcome you can't influence, or obsessing over what someone else thinks of you, something you fundamentally cannot control, no matter how much energy you throw at it. The dichotomy of control, practiced as a daily habit, works like a mental sorting system. The moment you notice your mind pulling towards something, ask, is this within my control? If yes, engage fully, focus completely, because this is exactly where your attention belongs. If no, consciously release it, not through suppression, but through the recognition that spending energy here is like trying to grip water. It will never work no matter how hard you try, and the effort itself is what's draining your focus in the first place. This is genuinely difficult at first, because our minds are addicted to worrying about things outside our control, and it feels productive, even though it accomplishes nothing. But with practice, you develop what feels like a mental filter, instantly redirecting energy away from uncontrollable noise and toward the actual controllable work in front of you. This alone can reclaim hours of previously wasted mental energy every single week. Habit 7, the one most people get backwards. I promised you this one, and here it is. The habit that most people misunderstand completely, and it's costing them dearly. Most people believe that focus comes from adding things. More willpower, more motivation, more productivity apps, more elaborate systems. The Stoics believed almost the exact opposite. They believed focus comes primarily from subtraction, from removing the unnecessary, not from adding more effort to fight through the noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be printed on the wall of every office in the world. If you seek tranquility, do less. He goes on to say that most of what we say and do is unnecessary, and if you eliminate it, you'll have more time and less disturbance. Notice what he's not saying. He's not saying work harder to overcome distraction. He's saying remove the unnecessary entirely, so there's less to overcome in the first place. Here's where people get it backwards. They try to build superhuman focus to power through an environment cluttered with unnecessary obligations, unnecessary notifications, unnecessary commitments, and unnecessary relationships that drain them. They're essentially trying to become strong enough to carry a backpack full of rocks they never needed to pack. The Stoic approach is radically different. Before you try to build more mental strength, first ask what doesn't need to be there at all. Practically, this means doing a ruthless audit. How many notifications on your phone are actually necessary? Most people, when they check, find the number is close to zero. How many meetings, obligations, or commitments in your week exist purely out of habit or guilt, rather than genuine necessity? How many relationships in your life require constant emotional attention that leaves nothing left for your actual goals? This isn't about becoming cold or isolated. The Stoics deeply valued relationships and community. It's about being honest regarding what's essential versus what's simply been accumulated by default over years of never questioning it. Every single unnecessary thing you remove is attention you get back permanently without ever having to try harder for it. This is why some of the most focused people you'll ever meet don't appear to be working harder than everyone else. They've simply removed almost everything that isn't essential, so what remains gets their full, undivided attention naturally. If you've made it this far, you're clearly serious about actually changing how your mind works, not just watching another video about it. So let me ask you honestly in the comments. What's one unnecessary thing in your life right now that you already know you need to remove? Naming it publicly tends to make people actually follow through. Try it. Habit 8. Negative visualization. The Stoics had a practice called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. Essentially, they would mentally rehearse difficulties before they happened. Seneca advised imagining exile, poverty, illness, even death, not to dwell in misery, but to remove the shock and fear when difficulties actually arrived, and to appreciate more deeply what you currently have. Applied to focus, this becomes an incredibly practical exercise. Before starting an important task, spend 30 seconds imagining the ways your focus could break down. Picture the phone buzzing. Picture the sudden urge to check something unrelated. Picture the moment, 10 minutes in, when your mind wants to wander towards something more comfortable. By mentally rehearsing these moments in advance, you remove their power to surprise you. When they actually happen, and they will, there's a strange sense of familiarity, almost as if you've already lived through this exact moment before and already decided how you'll respond. This is a technique elite performers across many fields use instinctively, often without realizing its ancient roots. Athletes visualize their opponent's likely moves. Surgeons mentally rehearse complications before entering the operating room. The Stoics simply understood, 2,000 years earlier, that the mind performs dramatically better when it isn't ambushed by difficulty, but has already met that difficulty once, in imagination before meeting it in reality. Habit 9. Single tasking as a moral practice. Here's something that will change how you see multitasking forever. The Stoics never used the word multitasking, obviously, but their entire philosophy was built around a concept that stands in direct opposition to it, the idea of acting with your whole mind, fully present on the task in front of you. Marcus Aurelius wrote about doing every act of your life as if it were your last, giving it your complete and serious attention, not because every act is dramatic or important, but because the habit of giving partial attention to everything eventually becomes the habit of giving partial attention to your entire life. He believed that a divided mind, one constantly split between several things at once, was actually a symptom of disordered thinking, not a mark of efficiency. Modern research has confirmed something the Stoics intuited without any laboratory. The brain does not actually multitask. It rapidly switches between tasks, and every switch carries a cost. A small tax on your mental energy and the quality of your attention. Someone who believes they're great at multitasking is often someone paying an enormous hidden cost they never notice, because the cost isn't visible in the moment. It shows up later, as mental fatigue, as shallow work, as a nagging feeling of having been busy all day while accomplishing very little that actually mattered. The Stoic practice here is deceptively simple. One task, fully present until it's complete or until you consciously choose to stop, never splitting your attention as a passive default. This doesn't mean you can never switch between tasks. It means the switch is a deliberate choice, not something that happens to you every time a new stimulus appears. Practicing single tasking as a genuine discipline, the same way you'd practice patience or honesty, gradually restores a kind of mental strength that constant task switching slowly erodes, without you even noticing it happening. Habit 10. Amor fati, loving what is. This next principle is one of the most misunderstood in all of Stoicism, and once you understand it correctly, it becomes an extraordinary tool for focus. Amor fati means love of fate, the practice of not just accepting, but actually embracing whatever happens, including the difficult, frustrating, and inconvenient parts of your day. Nietzsche later popularized the phrase, but the underlying Stoic idea goes back to Epictetus, who taught that we should not wish events to happen as we wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and then we shall do well. Here's the connection to focus that changes everything. So much wasted mental energy comes from resisting reality rather than working within it. Your internet is slow today. Your coworker interrupted your deep work session. The task in front of you is boring rather than exciting. The untrained mind spends enormous energy resenting these facts, wishing things were different, mentally arguing with reality itself, which notably never wins that argument, because reality doesn't negotiate. Amor fati applied practically means the instant you notice yourself resisting a circumstance, this task is boring, this interruption is unfair, this day isn't going how I planned, you consciously shift from resistance to acceptance, and then ask, given that this is exactly what's happening, what's the most focused, most useful thing I can do right now? This single shift saves an enormous amount of energy that would otherwise be spent fighting a battle against reality that was never winnable in the first place. The energy you stop wasting on resistance becomes energy immediately available for actual focus. Habit 11. The view from above. Marcus Aurelius describes a mental exercise where he imagines rising above the earth, looking down at all of human activity from a great height. Armies, celebrations, arguments, ambitions, all of it appearing small and fleeting from that perspective. He used this to gain distance from problems that felt overwhelming up close, allowing him to return to his tasks with renewed clarity, rather than being consumed by anxiety. This might sound abstract, but it has an extremely practical application for focus. When your mind is scattered because of anxiety over something, a conflict, a deadline, an uncertain outcome, that anxiety itself becomes a form of distraction, often more powerful than any phone notification. The view from above technique works by deliberately zooming out. Ask yourself, in 5 years, will this specific worry still occupy my mind? In 100 years, will anyone remember this moment at all? This isn't meant to make your problems feel meaningless in a nihilistic way. It's meant to restore proportion so that a minor inconvenience doesn't consume the same mental bandwidth as a genuine crisis. People who practice this regularly develop something like an internal thermostat for anxiety-driven distraction. Instead of every worry expanding to fill all available attention, they learn to size worries correctly, giving major things major attention and minor things minor attention, freeing up an enormous amount of mental space that was previously occupied by problems that, viewed from the correct distance, never deserved that much room in the first place. Habit 12. Daily philosophical reading. The final habit is perhaps the simplest, and yet it's the one that ties everything else together. The Stoics were relentless readers and rereaders of philosophy, not for entertainment, but as a form of daily mental training. The same way an athlete trains their body every single day, not just before competition. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius that he read a certain amount every day, and often returned to the same authors repeatedly, because wisdom needs to be revisited, not simply encountered once and filed away. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, still found time daily to read and reflect on philosophical teaching, because he understood something crucial: the mind, without consistent input of clarity and perspective, naturally drifts back toward noise, distraction, and disorder. It's not a one-time fix. It's maintenance. This is why watching a video like this one, as valuable as it might feel right now, isn't enough on its own. The habits described here need to be revisited, reread, reflected upon repeatedly, because the untrained mind will always try to slide back into its old patterns the moment reinforcement stops. This is precisely why so many people watch a motivational video, feel inspired for a day or two, and then quietly return to exactly where they started. Daily reflection. Even 5 minutes with a single Stoic passage, turned over in your mind throughout the day, creates the repetition that actual transformation requires. This is also, frankly, why this channel exists. Not to give you one video that changes everything, but to be a place you return to again and again, The way the Stoics themselves returned to the same teachings throughout their entire lives, never considering themselves finished students of their own minds. Bringing it all together, let's step back for a moment and look at what we've actually covered. Because these 12 habits aren't 12 separate techniques. They're one coherent system, each part reinforcing the others. The morning reservation claims your attention before the world does. The discipline of ascent trains you to pause before reacting to impulse. Voluntary discomfort builds your tolerance for the difficulty that focus always eventually requires. The evening review gives you the data to understand your own patterns. Memento mori gives your attention genuine urgency and weight. The dichotomy of control redirects your energy only toward what you can actually influence. Doing less removes the unnecessary noise you'd otherwise have to fight through. Negative visualization prepares you for distraction before it arrives. Single tasking restores the mental strength that constant switching erodes. Amor fati stops you from wasting energy resisting what's already happening. The view from above gives your worries the correct proportion. And daily reading maintains all of it. Because none of this works as a one-time event, it only works as a practice. None of these habits require money. None of them require special equipment or a perfect environment. They require only the willingness to actually apply them repeatedly, even when, especially when, it feels difficult. And that difficulty is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're doing exactly the thing that builds a stronger mind. The same way resistance builds a stronger muscle. Marcus Aurelius never had the luxury of a distraction-free environment. He wrote his private reflections while managing plagues, wars, betrayals, and the exhausting demands of ruling an empire that never stopped needing him. If a man in that position could train his mind to this degree of clarity and focus, then the modern distractions you're dealing with, real as they are not actually insurmountable. They only feel that way to an untrained mind. And now, you have the training. A final word. I want to leave you with something Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, words meant for no one else. Written in the quiet hours when even an emperor needed to remind himself of what mattered. He said that very little is needed to make a happy life, because it is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Your focus, your attention, your ability to sit with a single task and give it everything you have. None of that lives outside of you, waiting to be granted by better circumstances. A quieter house or a less demanding job. It lives inside you right now, waiting to be trained the way it was always meant to be trained. You don't need all 12 habits starting tomorrow. Pick one. Maybe it's the morning reservation. Maybe it's the dichotomy of control. Practice it this week, deliberately, the same way you'd practice any skill worth having. Then add another. This is not a race. The Stoics themselves spent entire lifetimes refining these practices, and they still considered themselves students, not masters. If this video gave you even one idea you plan to actually use, do 3 things for me. Like the video, so this reaches more people who need exactly this kind of clarity right now. Comment below with which habit you're starting with this week. I read every single one, and there's something powerful about writing your commitment down where others can see it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Wisdom of the Stoics, because we publish new teachings every week designed to help you build a calmer, sharper, more disciplined mind, one video at a time. Thank you for spending this time with me today, fully present, the way the Stoics themselves would have wanted. I'll see you in the next one.